I wanted to talk today a little bit about detoxification. As you know, illnesses don't really exist as such. Toxicity deficiencies, toxic poisoning, they exist. I want to talk about a few things that people think of as illnesses. Let's take Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. What are they really? Toxic poisoning and deficiency. So, which deficiencies? Well, B1. B1 is so crucial for any neurological functioning. And where do you get it? Well, like all the B vitamins, really you get it from food, but you can't get very much from a vegetable. It really needs to be an animal product. And I think that actually we're meant to be omnivores, not like Hillary Clinton. She's not a vegetarian or a meatitarian. When I first started being presented with patients with multiple sclerosis, most of them have been told that while it might remit a bit, it's just going to get continually worse. But that wasn't my observation. I was working with a medical doctor who was convinced that a big part of multiple sclerosis was actually a bacterial infection, possibly a sexually transmitted bacterial infection. And I watched him fix somebody, it seemed that way, with antibiotics. They got much better. And then a couple of years later, the condition came back, and he blamed it on the sexual relations that the guy was having with his girlfriend who'd left him for 2 years and come back. He reckoned he caught the same bacterial infection back again. And this time, instead of using antibiotics, we used a Tesla device, and within a month or so, he was much, much better. Now, I had an MS person yesterday, barely walk, really weak, and she got on the magic chair that we've got next door, and after 10 minutes, she said that she was effectively dancing. She'd been told that it would just get worse, and in 10 minutes, it got remarkably better. These things aren't meant to happen in the doctor's world, because doctors are taught that they are God, and that they can override the human body. We're all born with, in theory, we should be born with perfect self-repairing bodies. But doctors don't believe that. They don't believe we can self-repair. They think they've got to add a drug. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Autoimmune diseases don't exist. They're a con. The doctors have given you a vaccine, a drug, an antibiotic, whatever it is, and pretty much all of us who've had some sort of pharmaceutical drug have been damaged long-term with it. And so instead of the doctors admitting, I'm really sorry we damaged you with that drug, they say, you've caught an autoimmune disease. Your body's let you down, your body's gone wrong, whereas we should be realizing that we've been toxically poisoned, almost all of us, from a very, very young age. And the doctors, of course, can't admit that. They have to say, your body's gone wrong. But it doesn't work like that. Your bodies don't go wrong. They adapt. If you're in a situation where you're eating poisons or whatever it is, your body will change and adapt to that situation, but it won't let you down. So let's look at some of the things you can do, for instance, for Parkinson's. Well, vitamin B1, absolutely crucial. You can really bet your bottom dollar that everybody with a Parkinson's issue has got a B1 deficiency. Now, if you take vitamin B1, you may have to work out how much you need. I do a B complex, B vitamin complex, and there's B1 in there, but it's unlikely to be enough to fix a Parkinson's patient. It would be enough for you or I who are healthy and haven't got Parkinson's, but somebody who's got Parkinson's, they may need 2, they may need 4, they may need 6 capsules. But it's a pretty harmless thing. Nobody's ever died of a vitamin, as far as I know, nobody ever. One person, let's say, did die, the press would be full of vitamins are deadly and they must be killed. But if doctors kill somebody accidentally, they get off scot-free, basically. The doctor's license is a license to kill. If their drugs really worked, why would we need a repeat prescription? So I wouldn't go to a doctor unless there was an emergency, because they're not taught health. There's not one day in the 5 years of medical school that a healthy person is brought in, tell us what you did right. Recently I read this 122-year-old woman asked if she could give her younger self advice, what would it be? And she said, well, if I'd realized I was going to live this long, I would have looked after myself better. So one of the subjects that interested me early on was autism. The rate of autism has gone effectively from 0 to, figures vary, but maybe 1 in 10. I interviewed a medical doctor really high up in the American system in the National Institute of Health, and he said half-jokingly that how he foresaw the future was that we'd all be in a hospital bed looking after the person next to us. And if the autism rate rises, it's going to be a total disaster. We actually have to stop the autism right away before all of us are looking after autistic people. Now, I don't know how many of you know an autistic person, but I've seen reversal of autism for about 20 years now. Obviously, the younger you treat somebody, the more likely they are to get a reversal. The most trouble I ever got in was talking about autism. They really, really don't want you to know that autism is reversible. You know, obviously, the doctors don't believe it is. So, what are the keys for reversing autism? Well, one of them is to realize that pretty much every autistic child has got parasites. Why would they have parasites? Turns out the research seems to indicate that if you've got got toxic metals in your body or toxic poisoning, they think now that the body invites parasites in to eat the toxins and help you. I'm not sure how true that is. You know, there is an argument that every disease has a basis in parasites. Somebody's telling me this morning she got breast cancer and she'd been looking into iodine as a remedy, and she painted some on her breast. If you're going to paint iodine on the body, always test it with one little spot first in case you happen to be the rare person that's allergic to it. Anyway, she said that later that day parasites came out wiggling and brown out of her breast. So, as I mentioned yesterday, if I use any medical term like arthritis or cancer, for legal reasons I'm spelling it differently. And it's true, that's how you get around it apparently. So, with autistic children, parasites is a big issue. Now, how would you deal with them? Well, probably the most popular method, and this is what I got into most trouble for, was the material called CDS. CDS stands for chlorine dioxide solution. And it's basically 2 ingredients. You can buy them on Amazon. There's a company, I think it's called Life Force, who do a 2-part liquid water purifier. And it's actually sodium chlorite, not chloride, but sodium chlorite. And you mix that with an acid like lemon juice, and you get a product called chlorine dioxide. Now, it smells of chlorine, and people think, well, if it smells of chlorine, it must be bleach. And many things are bleach, from sunshine to lemon juice, they're bleaches. But this one smells of chlorine, and that was the problem with it. I got accused of suggesting that children should take bleach, right? That's what they hit me with. And I started giving talks about this, 10 years ago or something, and people would ring up the hotel where I was booked and cancel it. If that didn't work, if the hotel wouldn't cancel me, they used the old bomb threat as a way to clear the building. It was getting really silly. And I have to admit, at that point, I did back off a little bit. I was slightly less vocal than I had been. Anyway, Kerry Rivera wrote the book, Reversing the Symptoms Known as Autism. She thought if she wrote a book with reversing autism, that would get her into trouble, but reversing the symptoms known as autism. Anyway, for the next couple of years, she used to wear a bulletproof vest and had to flee America. She's got lots of videos. I've interviewed her loads of times over the last 20 years, and if you know people who want help with autism advice, Kerry Rivera is the one. There's an organization out there called Autism One, which where all the people who are at the forefront of autism research give talks every year. It's massive.